On the 21st of August 2025, a massive subsection of the gaming world collectively blew their load, having preserved it for over 6 years as they witnessed the release trailer of one of the most highly anticipated games in recent history. Ignoring the fact that this could have been one of the sickest April Fool's jokes to ever exist, hype of this magnitude rarely exists. While a good proportion of the hype came from the edging nature of Silksong's release date, the reality is that it was the sequel to one of, if not the greatest indie game to ever exist. Or at least that's what I've been told. See, I've never played Hollow Knight. Wait, stop. Don't click off the video. Now, I may not have played Hollow Knight, but I have heard horror stories from others regarding its difficulty. Me being the dumbass that I am though, always looked at them in disbelief. I mean, how hard could a game about killing bugs really be? Just for clarity's sake, this video will only cover the ass whooping I received when attempting to 100% the base game. For reasons I most likely don't have to explain, the expansions will have to wait for a separate video in the future. With that said, I think it's about time we delved into Hallownest, or as I've come to deem it, Hell. Before doing anything, I decided to fuck around with my keybinds. For anyone that cares, I played through the game using keyboard and mouse, mainly because I feel it to be far more precise. Either way, after finding the secret mount of dogshit, I made my way to the right where I expertly navigated the first platforming segment of the game. In all seriousness though, this first area isn't designed to be challenging. It literally throws the most basic enemy at us and even includes platforms that have no risk associated with them should you fall. I'd even go so far as to say that if you're somehow taking damage at this point, I'd recommend just uninstalling the game. The developers, knowing how dogshit I would be, placed the first and only tutorial in the entire game directly after this area, essentially telling us to heal up after taking that stalactite to the forehead. As a famous man once said though, mistakes are really just an opportunity for learning and growth. An opportunity I wiped my ass with and chucked in the bin as I fell for the exact same bullshit moments later. Despite my presumed IQ sitting at a cool 13, even I knew this jump wasn't possible at this stage, and instead we made our way into Dirtmouth, the first town in the game. The only resident here seems to be this elderbug, and having talked to him, it was obvious why. This guy hadn't brushed his teeth in decades, giving a whole new meaning to the name Dirtmouth. Given the putrid smell oozing out of his buck teeth, we had no choice but to drop down into the forgotten crossroads, where we were met with our first true roadblock. Given that I'm right-handed, I decided to go left, which begs the question why I even mentioned my dominant hand in the first place. Either way, this took us to a massive room that not only housed new enemy types, but also the first set of branching pathways. The enemies present here weren't too bad to take down, as they died within a few hits. That said, what I was concerned about was the level design in general. See, because of my cautious nature, I didn't want to delve too deep in the fear of not being able to make it back up. Instead, I looked to explore the pathways higher up first, which led to a crying caterpillar thing that seemed to be the last remaining member of his species, as well as a club bouncer that wouldn't budge. On the other side of things, we discovered this mysterious temple, made a new friend, and came across what I thought was our first boss fight. Or at least that's the cope I was feeling when I inevitably died to him. Luckily, whenever we rest on a bench, we actually leave an imprint of our butt cheeks, an imprint which attracts our souls back to them, ultimately ending up in our revival. What I hadn't realized, however, was the fact that we'd lose all our money, and the only way to get it back was to return to where we died and fight off this dog trying its hardest to impersonate us. Now, I may have gotten my ass blasted by this basic ass enemy, but I pride myself on how quickly I picked things up. And after finding a good rhythm, I was able to get my revenge. Surprisingly, he'd left his dinner plans in plain sight, and considering the trek we'd just completed, I thought we deserved a treat of our own. With our dinner scurrying away, we continued our trek through the forgotten crossroads, where I learned once again just how cancerous this place could truly be.
Oh my god, what the fuck? No, shit, I just got comboed like that.
The enemies in this first area really do emphasize how important spacing is, as moving too much could ultimately end up in us taking unnecessary damage. With that said, I had finally mustered up the balls to venture deeper, although every time I tried to, I'd just get cock-blocked by something else. When I did finally find a way, I ended up running into Cornifar, the only cartographer in the entire realm. I don't believe there's a more useful NPC in the entire game, as without this guy's maps, this video would most likely not exist. That said, if I told you I knew what I was looking at this point, I'd be fucking lying. With map in hand, we freed another grub, navigated our way through a hentai lover's wet dream, and stumbled across our first stag station. As amazing as it was to discover the existence of public transport in this kingdom, the more pressing matter took the form of our first boss fight against the False Knight. Now, I have no idea if this is the intended first boss, but given how long his attack windups are, I assumed he must be. The only attack that really caught me off guard was his ranged shockwave attack, but even then, I was able to beat this dumb bug down without much trouble. Not only does he drop the city crest, which we'll be using later, but we also gain access to our first chest, which instantly skyrockets our net worth to that of Elon Musk. From here, we blackmailed this witch into giving us our first magic spell, which we used to eviscerate this bouncer, earning us our first charm. When equipped at a bench, these charms provide useful abilities and passive buffs. More importantly though, they add 1% to our completion counter. Alongside charms, if we wish to obtain 100%, we'll also need to defeat bosses, upgrade our now, learn its arts, acquire all the equipment, learn every spell, collect all the mask and vessel shards, defeat all the dream warriors, and complete every tier of the Colosseum of Fools. With that monumental list urging us on, we returned to Dirtmouth only to find a shop had opened up for us. This shop was run by Iselda, Cornifer's wife, and while I wasn't aware of it at the time, this shop sold one of the best charms in the entire game. Unfortunately, that whole spiel about having Elon's net worth was pure cope, as we barely managed to buy anything. With that embarrassing realization dawning upon us, we returned to the crossroads where I put our new spell to good use. Surprisingly, this bouncer had been guarding the entrance to a whole new area. An area that, despite its luscious looks, filled me with an unexplainable dread. As curious as I wasn't quite ready for the fisting that was surely waiting within this area, instead looking to receive it back in the crossroads, as I could not for the life of me get the timing down on these bounces.
Fuck!
With my health quickly diminishing, I decided to call it quits for now and instead looked to explore deeper, where I came across the Gruzmother. This boss was extremely weak, as we only needed to strike her a dozen or so times to defeat her. Now that's not to say I didn't get absolutely pounded during her tantrum attacks, but luckily the fight didn't last nearly long enough to put up a real challenge. With her out of the way, we can rescue this pitiful midget who tells us to come visit him back in Dirtmouth, as thanks for helping him. As tempting as this offer was, my ego remained shattered following those pathetic pogo attempts. So, in an attempt to restore some of it, I made my way back to that room where I once again got my asshole skewered time and time again. Like any gambling addict will tell you though, persistence is key. And after a short while, I did manage to reach this grub. With my ego restored, we ventured back to Dirtmouth to see what Sly had on offer, and fuck me, he wasn't kidding about having the best wares in town. The main thing that stood out to me, however, was the Lumifly lantern, although unfortunately we were far too broke to afford it at this point. So instead, I just bought a Mars shard and called it a day. Now, in my mind, I had fully explored the crossroads, which meant my only choice was to return to Greenpath, which also meant new enemy variants. These included these guys who cuck you after death, as well as these bushes that will literally spawn inside your asshole if you're not paying attention. Despite getting hit multiple times within the span of a few minutes, the music here was surprisingly positive and hopeful. This unfortunately didn't stop us getting shat on by every conceivable enemy, as we once again stumbled across Cornifer. It was also in this very area where I learnt of hidden areas that weren't visible on the map until you discovered them.
Well, duh.
With the idea of hidden areas lodged into my mind, I would spend whole ass minutes just smacking the shit out of random walls, secretly getting gassed at the prospect of finding something cool, only to be disappointed when I realized how stupid I would look. Either way, we grabbed the Hunter's Journal from the Hunter, reconfirmed that I was complete dogshit at pogoing off spikes, and came across a sanctuary which was so dark I might as well have been blind. Knowing there was no way in hell I'd make it through this hellhole in one piece, I instead looked to save up for the Lumifly lantern, as I was sure that it'd be the key to exploring these darker areas. For now though, I found myself pogoing across this creature, before following some bubbles into an area called the Fog Canyon. If nuking myself with these homing jellyfish wasn't a clear enough sign, the fact that a black barrier blocked my way told me all I needed to know about this area. Instead, I returned to Greenpath and made my way skyward, only to be met by an enemy that could do the unthinkable. The realization that enemies could now block my attacks filled me with absolute dread as I struggled to take down this warrior. With that said, defeating him led us to this poor bastard who'd become this Vengefly's dinner without realizing. Again, these early mini-bosses are extremely easy to defeat as they basically only have 1 or 2 attacks. The only problem is I had no idea what these attacks were, so I'd oftentimes take a pounding before learning how to effectively dodge and damage them in the same vein. Skill issues aside, we did manage to defeat this flying monstrosity on our first attempt, yet instead of thanking us, we learned that Zote, the loser here, is quite the narcissist. As awkward as this was, Zote was the least of our worries, as I soon came to realize just how many of these shielded enemies were roaming in this area. Thankfully, there's no rule to say that we need to defeat every single enemy in our way, and in this case, I actively looked to avoid them as I ventured towards our second stag station. It wasn't necessarily the stag station itself that excited me, rather the fact that each of them oftentimes comes with a bench. Honestly, it was shocking to see how much confidence I gained knowing I had recently saved my progress at a bench, and with that confidence fueling us, we fought our way through these shielded enemies without breaking a sweat. This not only led to another grub, but also our first real encounter with Hornet. Now compared to every boss that came before her, Hornet is extremely mobile, not in her movements but with her attacks as well. This not only made the fight far more stressful, but also far more fun than any previous fight we'd attempted. She's the first boss where I truly had to slow down and learn her attack patterns, otherwise I'd be hard camping the respawn bench. That said, she leaves enough time between her attacks to get plenty of heals off, so we did manage to defeat her on our first attempt. A reward for besting Hornet was the Mothwing Cloak, a cloak that somehow gives us the ability to dash. Using it, we're able to reach areas and complete platforming challenges we had no hope of completing beforehand, although it didn't miraculously make me better at it either, if we're being honest. As cool as this dashing mechanic was, my dogship platforming had left me with one mask, a mask I lost to one of the weakest enemies in the entire game. There's something to be said about the fear of dying, especially when you know doing so results in you losing all of your geo and returning to that imprint of your arse cheeks. It makes navigating Hallownest a daunting experience, especially when you're low on masks. For my own personal peace of mind, I look to return to the Forgotten Crossroads where I paid a visit to the old grub guy, only to realize the grubs we'd been saving had ended up here. Better yet, this guy seemed to reward us for returning his children, not only with geo but with some other beneficial items. After a quick visit to Dirtmouth where we talked to Tiso, we returned to the Forgotten Crossroads, although it didn't take long to discover a wholly new area. It's here where we meet with Leg Eater, a strange bug that sells some of the best charms in the entire game. Unfortunately, they're pretty useless on someone like me, as they break for good the moment you die. We will need to buy these bad boys eventually if we're going to have any hope of 100%ing this game, but for now, I was far too occupied with taking out these Walking King oyster mushrooms. Their love for headbanging was inspiring to say the least, but they weren't all that tough, and after collecting our first charm notch, we continued our quest which saw us stalking Hornet. Luckily for us, restraining orders hadn't been issued in Hallownest for years, meaning there was no possible way Hornet could escape our grasp. Alright, never mind. Having been absolutely humbled, we looked to regain some of that lost aura by clearing out the Mantis Village, a hostile area in which we had to prove ourselves worthy of being the main character. This saw us challenging the Mantis Lords, which remain one of the best fights in the entire game. The sheer pace at which these guys attack caught me off guard multiple times, although the hardest attack to avoid in my personal opinion are these goddamn discs that change height throughout their trajectory. To no one's surprise I'm sure, I was caught trying to heal and ultimately dispatched as a weakling as I found myself whisked away to my arse cheeks imprint once again. It was at this moment that I realized just how aid some of these runbacks could be, as I tried my best to navigate my way through countless mantises all trying to get a piece of this arse. Considering how unfamiliar I was with these enemies, it was almost a given I'd take some damage on the way to the Mantis Lords again, which wasn't exactly ideal as these guys were relentless in their pursuit, especially when having to deal with two of them at once. With that said, I had discovered opportunities to get a quick heal in, and while I wasn't taking advantage of every opportunity to get some damage in, I did eventually manage to whittle them down and earn their respect. Our reward for beating them, however, was entry to one of the worst areas in the entire game. Even though I managed to find Cornifer almost immediately, there was no way in hell I was going to venture through this area without any light after having heard these horrifying sounds.
Oh my fucking god, yeah, there's no fucking shot on doing that. What?
Instead, I picked up the Mantis Claw ability as I made my way back to the Queen's Station. I had planned on picking up the Lumifly Lantern from Sly, but not before trying my hand at this platforming challenge, which I was expectedly wank at.
Ah, I see. Maybe I shouldn't fucking dash into that shit. Oh my fucking god.
The pain that came from dashing headfirst into a set of thorns over and over again was in the end worth it, as we grabbed yet another mask shard. We then finished our first full mask by using our new Mantis Claw ability to reach this area filled with pure nightmare fuel. With our cortisol levels reaching near infinite peaks, we looked to calm down in the hot springs, only to find two assholes talking shit about us.
Wait, are these guys, are they talking shit? Wait, they actually are. Wait, they quiet down when I'm close to them. Wait, are you kidding me? I'm getting roasted by bugs.
I'd never admit it in front of them, but their whispering insults had left me quite dejected, and during this period of trance, I'd somehow found myself facing off against the brooding Morlek. If being roasted by a duo of butt-naked bugs sitting in a massive bath wasn't embarrassing enough, I was once again reminded just how doo-doo I was at this game. I'm not sure what it was about this boss, I just couldn't wrap my head around how to dodge most of his attacks. His quick melee attacks in particular caught me off guard more times than I like to admit, as I was often focused on dodging the plops of piss raining down on us. Ironically enough, this simple boss was the hardest one I'd faced so far. Even after learning I could dash over him to avoid his vomit attack, it still wasn't smooth sailing. I must have died 4 or 5 times before I finally locked in and defeated him. We're rewarded with another mask shard for our efforts, which I doubled up on after returning to the Stone Sanctuary. Following this, I made my way back into the Fog Canyon before eventually ending up at the Overgrown Mound. This place wasn't so much a mound than a nest for these little bomb diving critters, although at this point we'd perfected our timing, meaning they weren't too bad to deal with even as a large group. It was at the end of this mound where we obtained our second spell. Our next movement saw us stealing from the dead, coming across a suspicious banker, and generally just not knowing where the fuck to go next. I must have spent a good 30 minutes just running around within different areas being completely lost before I remembered the area in which we'd last seen Hornet. Apparently this marked the end of the Pilgrim's Way, and while the bridge had been retracted, our Mantis Claw allowed us to navigate through these thorned tunnels, ultimately ending off at the levers required to open up the bridge once again. Not only that, but we were able to insert the city crest that had been dropped by the False Knight into the statue here, granting us access to the City of Tears. Now I've got to say, nothing had moved me nearly as much as the dynamic music in this city, and listening to it open up into this grand melody the moment you reach the crown level was nothing short of orgasmic. Unfortunately, blowing my load wasn't going to help us in our quest for 100%. What would certainly help, however, was a stronger weapon, and luckily for us, the City of Tears just so happens to house the best nailsmith in the entire land. Or he could just be the only nailsmith. I mean, who knows? Strangely, he requested our left nutsack in return for upgrading our nails, something I wasn't exactly ready to part with just yet. So instead, I looked to explore the rest of the city, eliminating any guard that stood in my way. For as many guards as there were patrolling the city grounds, none of them seemed particularly hard to defeat, especially when half of them would rather kill themselves than fight us.
Wait, what? You fucking dumbass.
After paying Cornifer for another map, we spend more money for a bench as well as the access rights to this lift. Being perpetually broke wasn't a great feeling, but opening up this elevator did result in us grabbing our first soul fragment. It also allowed us to reach the Soul Sanctum, the worst area in the entire city, as it features an enemy type so annoying, I'd rather dip my sack into a boiling pot of tea than face these guys.
Oh my, why is it, holy, this is so fun. Why does it feel like I'm getting fucking railed, man? Holy shit. As I expected, things would only get worse the higher up I climbed, and soon enough, I was trapped in a room with a soul warrior. Now, in hindsight, this guy is a complete joke, but his rapid attacks and teleportation skills really caught me off guard to say the least. It also didn't help that I walked into this area without full health and no soul, although I can't really use that as an excuse as I got my ass handed to me multiple times while fighting this guy. Like everything else though, the moment I start smashing my head against something, I don't give up until I break it down. Now despite all that bravado, the moment I came across what may go down as the most obvious boss arena in gaming history, I turned tail and ran my ass back to the nailsmith, where I instantly offered my left nut in exchange for a more powerful nail.
What did he say?
Despite the Noctua childbearing abilities, the significance of this upgrade was felt almost immediately, as I could now one-shot smaller enemies. With our confidence at an all-time high, I blitzed my way through the Soul Sanctum only to arrive at that unsettling arena once again. As expected, this rooftop acted as the arena in which we had to fight the Soul Master, one of the more annoying bosses we'd come across so far. The main struggle in finding this wannabe magician is having to deal with his constant teleporting. See, before every attack he will teleport to a random position, and considering how fast some of his attacks are, it's easy to get overwhelmed and not be able to react in time. Even worse, he's got this attack that will literally fake you out, causing you to dodge at the worst possible time.
Oh, you fucking cunt.
There were multiple times where I was down to my last mask, but the one saving grace about this boss is there are very obvious openings in which we can get a heal off. It was incredibly tense, but we were able to defeat this guy on our first attempt, or at least that's what I thought. For the first time ever, we'd come across a boss with a second phase, and while he only seemed to have 2 attacks, the fact I was stuck on one mask made every moment extremely crucial. With that said, the fact that he stands still while shooting these orbs makes it extremely easy to get some solid damage on him in a short time frame, ultimately leading to his defeat and us obtaining the spell Desolate Dive. Like many of the spells in this game, we're given a chance to use it straight away, although I don't appreciate the fact that we were dropped into a cesspool of ghosts whose only purpose seemed to be wanting to fondle our last remaining testicle. In hopes of keeping things PG, let's just say I managed to handle these ghosts with one hand before reaching yet another grub. Back in the City of Tears, we used the simple key we had found on this body to open up the manhole leading to the city's sewerage system. Now, you'd think infrastructure responsible for moving literal shit would be better protected, yet these drainage systems house everything from these pufferfish ripoffs to literal bomb diving birds. If that wasn't bizarre enough, we somehow found a mask shard down here, while also learning of the knight's carefree disposition despite jumping around in literal sewage water. The icing on the cake, however, revealed itself as we entered another suspiciously open room. Ignoring why the fuck this guy even exists, he isn't exactly a tough boss. Sure, his unpredictable movements and bounces make it harder to avoid his attacks, but there's honestly ample time to get some heals off should you need them, as well as the fact that he stands completely still while throwing literal shit at us, making it easy to pile on a ton of damage. Following his defeat, we grabbed the defender's crest before making our way back to the City of Tears. I know it feels like we've been here for a while, but I hadn't even explored the other side of the city yet, and there was a very good reason why.
Holy look at all this damage!
These massive guards were extremely cancerous to deal with. Not only did they block a good majority of my attacks, the fact their strikes did 2 whole masks of damage meant I had to play extremely cautiously when fighting them. This was only amplified when I was stuck in the smallest room possible with one of them, or because I needed to save these dumbass grubs. That said, I think out of all my encounters with these great husk sentries, this fight here was the most beneficial in learning how to deal with them. The other benefit of fighting our way to the side of the city was discovering King's Station. Seeing as we were already here, I made the executive decision to return to Dirtmouth, as Sly's shop contained the last mask shard I'd need to complete yet another full mask. By some miracle, we were low-key rich at this point, meaning I felt inclined to doomspend to the point of being broke once again. With our in-game savings matching that of my IRL savings, we made our way back to the King's Station, where I was lulled into a false sense of security as I believed the area above this station would be just as tame as the station itself. To our enemies' dismay though, Persistence was my middle name, meaning I wasn't going to back down until I'd become Pesticide itself and nuked this entire room of bugs. I didn't care if this meant we'd spend most of our time dashing from side to side to sneak in heals. All I cared about was that final vessel fragment hidden behind the locked gate. With our first soul vessel completed, I was curious to see where this massive lift would take us. Safe to say, it didn't take us anywhere we wanted to be.
Yeah, no thank you. I don't want to fight that guy.
Joking aside, we soon found ourselves in a desolated landscape, only to stumble across the Dreamer's Spire not long after. We learn of the 3 dreamers and their lifelong goal of breaking the Guinness World Record for the longest time asleep. In reality though, they're just lazy bums who imprisoned our helpless brother behind the seal in the Temple of the Black Egg, and wanting nothing more than to free him, we made it our goal to disrupt their sleep for good. To do this, we'd need to use the Dream Now, which was graciously given to us by this random moth thing at the end of our first dream sequence. Awkwardly, we wake in the wings of the Seer, who's been bathing and feeding us during our week-long hibernation session. As such, she becomes an important NPC to us, not only for her caretaking abilities, but for the numerous items she offers in return for charging up the Dream Now with essence. This essence can be garnered in multiple ways, the simplest of which is defeating Dream Warriors like Zero here. The large majority of these Dream Warrior fights are rather simple, mainly due to their lack of a moveset. Then again, who knows how long these guys have been dead? It's only right that they'd forget the large majority of the attacks they used when they were alive. The only somewhat challenging aspects of these fights in general is being able to hit them, as they constantly move around the area or teleport, as we'll come to see with a few other bosses. Either way, defeating Zero awards us with a cool 100 essence, which while nice, is barely enough to get the seer to give us a Hollowness seal. With a goal now embedded in our heads, we made our way back to the City of Tears, where we stumbled across yet another door with a simple lock. Luckily, I hadn't bought the simple key from Sly yet, and while it posed some financial struggles, it soon became clear that this was one of our best investments to date.
Ooh, the pleasure house, yeah? Ooh, I wonder what spicy stuff the knight's gonna get up to in here.
2 seconds later.
Well, that was fucking shite. What a waste of money.
In reality though, there really wasn't much to do here at this stage. In fact, all we got out of this was a rather disappointing concert from Marissa here. She was so off it, in fact, that we ended up putting her out of her misery, before offering the only bug to have an eating disorder despite having passed away. As I was making my way out of the City of Tears, I came across another method to farm essence in the form of these roots. Dream nailing them causes them to shoot their load throughout the surrounding area, and it's up to us to awkwardly platform our way around it in order to collect them all. With no idea where to go next, I scoured my map for an area I hadn't explored yet, and despite my hesitancy, there seemed to be only one answer. Safe to say, I wasn't looking forward to whatever was waiting for me in these horrific tunnels. The Lumify lantern that I'd worked so hard to obtain earlier on in the game had now become our worst purchase of all time. And why is that, you ask? Because it illuminated some of the most terrifying enemies in the entire game.
Brother, what's that?
When it comes to locations in Hollowness, I doubt many, if any, could match how hopeless and terrified Deepness makes new players feel. You can barely see shit, you have these massive fucking centipedes that you can't damage burrowing throughout the area, not to mention the numerous pathways that lead to nothing but pain.
Oh my god, I fucking hate this place.
Honestly, I can't think of a worse place to die. I mean, imagine having to traverse this nightmare with the fear that if you die again, you'd lose all your hard-earned money. Now, I'll be the first to admit that I still hadn't gotten pogoing down pat by this point, evident by the numerous mistakes I'd make while trying to platform through this area. With that said, I need to know which sick fuck thought it'd be a sick idea to have us bouncing off these freakish centipedes while attempting to dash and avoid these spike-covered obstacles. My arsehole had never been clenched for such a prolonged period of time, which is something I really didn't need to say, but I honestly can't think of a better way to illustrate how unsettling this area really was. Even after completing this platforming segment and grabbing another vessel fragment, there was no time to rest, as our enemies thought it'd be a sweet idea to reanimate themselves into walking corpses, essentially hard-locking our heart rate to a tame 140 beats per minute.
What the fuck is that sound? Don't you fucking dare. Don't you fucking dare.
Ironically enough, it seems we weren't the only ones struggling to carve a path throughout this area, as we once again ran into this mighty loser. To no one's surprise, he was still a narcissistic asshole who spent most of his time glazing his nail. The more we explored, the more our confidence waned, as we not only discovered an arachnophobe's worst nightmare, but also a failed tramline, highlighting just how grim the state of this place was. The only positive I can pull from our time in this area was us obtaining the tram pass. This will be useful later on, but for now, we had another dream warrior to put out of their misery. The fight against Galleon reminded me of the Dung Defender, not only because he smelled like he hadn't showered in decades, but because his main attack involved him bouncing his scythe around the arena. Despite the scattered nature of this attack, the fact it remained his only attack made this fight a rather underwhelming one. Not to worry though, as there were plenty of other creatures who made Deep Nest a living hell. By some miracle, I'd arrived at the distant village, although instead of relief, I only felt fear. The main reason, I hadn't rested at a bench in what felt like a millennia. As if I was blessed by the gods, however, we're presented with a bench in the main lodge of this village. It also came with premium service, as every single one of these butler guys told us to relax and rest. So that's exactly what we did.
Wait, what? Ah, fuck.
You're a fucking idiot.
Okay, we are cooked.
Our capture places us in the Beast's Den, a more linear cave system that forced us to deal with these massive armored spider things. I won't lie, it took me a hot minute to figure out how the fuck we were even supposed to damage them, and even now, the only thing I could think of was getting in a single hit just before they started charging before dashing away to safety. This was tedious to say the least, but it was a safe and effective method of dealing with copious amounts of them hidden throughout this tunnel system. During our ascension towards the top of this den, I came across this random ass grub as well as a bench, thank fuck. With our confidence restored, I stalked my way to the top of this den where we came across Sleeping Beauty, if Sleeping Beauty was chopped. Using our dream nail on this creature takes us into another dream realm where we made short work of Hera the Beast. We then suck up her juices for whatever reason before narrowly escaping being eaten by whatever the fuck this thing's supposed to be. To the very end, this place remained a shit show as I even got my ass handed to me while trying to platform my way out of this horrid place.
Dude, just get me out of this place, please. I fucking hate it here.
The bigger problem on my mind, however, was where the fuck we were going next. The exploration in this game is top notch, and I can't argue with the fact that discovering new things and revealing hidden areas is one of the many shining points of this game. That said, it was also one of the biggest contributing factors to me feeling like a complete dumbass.
So I'm completely fucking lost.
A good portion of my game time just saw me standing around like an idiot pretending to have some photographic memory of the game map, only to then go and look at one and still be completely fucking lost.
What are you doing? What are you doing?
Nothing. Me? Just hanging around.
Alas, I wasn't going to let my terrible sense of direction hold me back, and despite somehow ending up in deep nest once again, I for once had a plan. See, what I had failed to remember for the last hour or so was the fact that we had picked up the tram pass, meaning if I could make my way to a tram station, there was a very good chance I'd end up somewhere completely new. And lo and behold, this theory worked like a charm, as I ended up at, yeah, I have no idea. Look, the important thing is, it was somewhere fresh and low-key dangerous. Where there's danger, however, there's reward, and following the destruction of these Morlech babies, we were able to grab our first piece of pale ore. Before long, we'd bought ourselves another rest stop, only to embark on what I thought was a chance to practice my pogoing skills. Little did I know that after all this effort, it would all be for nothing, as I couldn't even fucking make it up to the ledge above.
Wait, how do I get up top? Don't tell me I fucking wasted my time doing this shit. Oh, you fucking gotta be kidding me.
Dejected, I returned to the tram and rode it one more stop to yet another unfamiliar place. As I passed through this area, I discovered the hive, but with no conceivable means to reach the higher ground, I made a mental note to return later and continued into an area known as Kingdom's Edge. This place is made up of tiny flies, massive flies, tiny hopper things, and of course, massive fucking hoppers that I shamelessly cheese killed. At the end of this pathway was a bench, as well as the hut of Nailmaster Oro, who I most definitely didn't mistake as Oreo for the rest of the game.
Wait, Nailmaster Oreo?
He was willing to teach us a legendary nail art, as long as we handed over our last remaining testicle. No idea why everyone is obsessed with our reproductive organs, although considering our unlikelihood of ever getting a girlfriend, I thought this was a rather worthy sacrifice. Now, as cool as I thought I was learning this nail art, I was still getting absolutely humbled by ledges that were just too far out of reach. Instead, I was forced to climb my way up this massive gap, which surprisingly led me to the Colosseum of Fools. Here we not only reunite with Zode, who had been captured like an idiot, but Tiso as well, who I full on expected to be a boss of one of these arena challenges. For now though, I decided to take on the Trial of the Warrior, which was the first of 3 arena challenges. What I noticed immediately, however, was the fact that these challenges included enemies that I'd never seen before. I later learned that there are enemies in these trials that only appear in the Colosseum of Fools, making it harder to learn their attack patterns given the limited exposure we've had to them. With that said, the arena is wide enough to dash across, giving us plenty of time to heal in between waves should we need to. Things do get harder the further into the trials we get, with spikes emerging from the ground forcing us to fight on top of platforms. And as we'll come to see in future trials, the most challenging aspects usually come from when we're unable to stand at all. But for now, all we needed to do was best the almighty Zode? As expected, this guy was an absolute beast with fast and precise attacks that were extremely hard to dodge. Yeah, never mind. This guy was a complete joke.
Completing this first trial awards us with a ton of geo as well as a charm notch, which gives us more wiggle room when it comes to picking our charms. What was a welcome surprise was just how close the Colosseum was to the City of Tears. While we were here, I made it a point to revisit the nailsmith as we could trade in our pale ore alongside a lung to get him to refine our nail once more. With another upgrade under our belt, I thought it was about time we ventured back to the Forgotten Crossroads in the hopes of reaching new areas and collecting anything we'd missed. What I initially thought to be a relaxing adventure through an easy area soon became a horrific nightmare as the crossroads weren't exactly how I remembered them.
What's happened here? No. Not the crossroads as well, not my safe space, no.
Older enemies who used to be a breeze now made it their life goal to cover us in vomit, while others charged us without a second thought. Thankfully, the Forgotten Crossroads became a short detour as I stumbled across a toll machine that I'd forgotten about earlier in the game. This opened the gate to the Crystal Peak, a stunning area that didn't seem nearly as hostile as the last few areas we'd ventured through. I mean look, there's even working class civilians here. Alright, I may have spoken too soon. This location, like the rest, had its fair share of annoying sections, the first of which took the form of these laser shooting arseholes. See, at this point, I was sure they were indestructible because I couldn't hurt them with my nail. It wasn't until much later where I learnt you could defeat them with magic, so you can imagine just how infuriating it was avoiding them all as I jumped my way towards the Crystal Peak. Get it? Along the way, we came across this sad looking creature who had most likely been dumped by his girlfriend. Wanting nothing more than to put him out of his misery, we looked to execute a quick yet painless slash. The fight against this guy did catch me off guard, as I underestimated just how fast his beam attacks were and how long they lingered for. After getting the timing down though, he was a rather easy foe to defeat. Continuing our ascent, we find the shopkeeper's key before dashing through these meat crushers without breaking a sweat. Our main goal for coming here was to obtain a new ability. The only problem was that this ability was locked behind another platforming challenge, a challenge I was determined to complete on my first attempt. Okay, it may have taken multiple attempts, but we did manage to narrowly dash our way across these flipping platforms to what I can only describe as the fattest spider to ever exist. Braindead comments aside, we learned the Crystal Heart ability, which concentrates the force of our farts to such a degree that we can then use it to propel us through the air at breakneck speeds. This ability has many uses, one of which sees us freeing this nearby grub. For whatever reason, acquiring this next ability gave me this unfounded confidence to continue exploring the nearby areas, and despite the warning signs,
You're a donut! You're so stupid!
I pressed on until I entered the crystallized mound. This, like the overgrown mound we'd ventured through back in Fox Canyon, is a small offshoot area that often houses a reward at the end of it. The only problem was that these turning platforms had now been paired with these little bastards that shoot crystals out of their arse. The more annoying thing, however, is that even if you avoid their attacks, they'll leave behind a little crystallized hedge that damages you should you hit them. The worst part in all of this though is should you die while traversing these platforms. There's a good chance your shade will pick the most cancerous location to rest.
Oh my, look at this idiot, man. Why is he over here? How am I supposed to there's no way I can kill this guy without dying again. Fuck.
Thankfully in my case, I was able to lure him back to this upper area, and not long after, I'd obtained the Descending Dark spell. Following this, I freed another grub before making use of our new Crystal Heart ability as I shot myself back towards Dirtmouth. Upon visiting Sly's shop, we learned that the shopkeeper's key we found in the Crystal Peak actually belonged to him, and with it, he was able to sell us some of his rarer loot. This loot included things like another mask shard, a vessel fragment, some charms that we need for 100%, as well as an elegant key. Having single-handedly funded Sly's retirement, I made my way back to the Seer in the hopes that she'd have some more rewards for us. Disappointingly though, all she could manage this time around was a single pale ore, as well as opening the door to the Spirit's Glade. This place essentially acts as a graveyard where we're able to communicate with the many souls of past bugs. Now, most people would see this as a cool little lore dump. Me, on the other hand, saw this as a great opportunity to farm some essence.
Okay, we are cooked.
Having narrowly escaped death once again, I made my way back to the infected crossroads where I ran into Salubra, the charm lover. She not only sells some of the best charms in the entire game, but also the large majority of charm notches, most of which become available based on how many charms you own. Now, considering I'd be the one begging a homeless man for money based on my current financial situation, I made my way back to the City of Tears where I'd recently ran into this old guy. The great thing about him, aside from his stories about his treacherous journeys to primary school, was the fact that we could sell him these useless relics we'd been collecting for a decent amount of geo. With our bank account now reflecting what seemed to be a case of money laundering, we quickly made our way back to Salubra where our main goal was to buy out as many charm notches as we could. I also made sure to purchase the Long Nail and Quick Focus charms, both of which became mainstays within my arsenal. Our next stop saw us returning to the ancient basin, and more specifically, that treacherous spike tunnel that humbled me all that time ago. This time around though, it was going to be me doing the humbling, and after charging up our Crystal Heart ability, I laughed my way across these pathetic spikes. With our aura levels at an all-time low, restoring it became our top priority. This was easier said than done however, especially when I was dashing straight into the regurgitated dinner of these obese Morlurks. On a more positive note however, I did manage to find another simple key, which I ripped out of the cold dead hands of this loser. What I hadn't realized at the time however was that this corpse just so happened to be the boyfriend of this vessel here, and upon learning of our vile acts, looked to execute his own revenge. The resulting fight is a rather tough one, which sees this absolute menace jump around the arena, spawning blobs of shit, while other blobs of shit materialize out of thin air with the sole purpose of fucking us. His attacks are so rapid, and the constant spawning of these dumbass blobs makes it almost impossible to find an opening to heal, and while it was a valiant attempt, I did succumb to the vessel's revenge. What became clear during this first fight, however, was the need to focus on the little mobs that could randomly spawn out of thin air. They aren't the fastest enemies, but they're so easy to miss as you're trying to avoid the vessel's attacks that they often surprise you at the worst moments, leading to dumbass chip damage. Once I started to focus on getting rid of them first, the fight became surprisingly easy to read, leading to our eventual victory. Defeating him opened up a gate which led to a small enclave where the Monarch's wings rested. These wings essentially gave us the ability to double jump, although before we even given a real chance to use them, I noticed some strange aura oozing off the vessel we just clapped. Curious, I slapped his cheeks with the Dream Nail, only to be transported into another dream world, where we faced off against his more badass counterpart. Not only is this version far more aggressive and rapid with his attacks, the rate at which these blob arseholes spawns also seems to be far quicker. If you thought it was impossible to heal before, here, you can't even fucking heal during staggers. Safe to say, I got my ass kicked here multiple times, to the point where I made the executive decision to come back to this fight when I was a little bit stronger. On the bright side though, now that we have the Monarch wings, there's a lot we can do. Although strangely enough, the first area which came to mind was the hive. As you'd expect, this place was full of, well, bees.
No shit.
And these guys range from small little critters to medium-sized ones that somehow spawn a fucking drill out of their faces. Concerningly though, they aren't even the worst ones here, as there's an even larger variant that uses its fat ass to slam around the rooms, causing massive damage to anything they hit. There is a cool section that has us luring these obese fuckers into this wall, allowing us to reach another Mars shard, but outside of that, they're just massive assholes. The worst of them all, however, makes himself known as we're bum rushed by numerous bees. Now, I'm not sure about the general consensus surrounding the Hive Knight, but I honestly struggled so much with this fight. Not only are his movements quite rapid, for the life of me, I couldn't avoid these balls that shoot off stingers in every direction. Holy fuck, I've just been railed by a fucking bee! I could literally have a gun to my head, and if I'm told to dodge these fucking things, I'd just fucking tell you to pull the trigger. The worst part isn't even the fight itself though, it's the atrocious runback, where we have to either defeat or avoid countless bees, all of which have annoying as fuck attack patterns. I'm not even joking when I say I'd rather take a nuclear missile up my arse. Safe to say, I wasn't exactly having a blast with this hive area, and because I value my mental health to a certain degree, I once again made the decision to come back to this spot at a later point. Instead, I looked to explore a different section of the Royal Waterways, one we couldn't access before as we hadn't obtained the Crystal Heart ability yet. There was really only one reason for coming here. We were seeking Isma's tear. Unfortunately, the bugs inhabiting these sewers saw Isma as their god, and as a result did everything in their power to deal with us. It's just a real shame that their combined power essentially amounted to fuck all, as this was one of the easiest combat trials yet. With Isma's tear in our possession, we're now able to swim through the acidic sewage waste of Hallownest, and while I wasn't sure why the fuck we'd want to, the fact of the matter was that we needed to if we wanted to save these grubs. Speaking of newer abilities, now that we're able to double jump, we can now make our way up Kingdom's Edge towards the cast-off shell. Standing in our way, however, is Hornet once again, yet despite me thinking she'd be far stronger this time around, she felt remarkably easier. This isn't to say she didn't have a few extra moves at her disposal, some of which were far more annoying than others, but I just think the wider array of charms and the upgraded weapons we had at this point did far too much heavy lifting. Following her defeat, she fills us in on the fact that we shared the same father and that his last remaining possession remained below in the Great Worm's exploded testicle. The smell was absolutely horrid, but the power to open any door in Hallownest was far too overpowered to ignore. The kingdom's gates will open. Does that mean I can open like every door now or something?
2 seconds later.
Wait, what? Wait, let me in. I have the king's brand. Having felt gaslit, I spent the next 20 minutes aimlessly wandering around, wondering how I'd fallen for such an obvious bait. Things would only get worse though, as I found myself falling into a room that looks like it could be on the set of Saw. Oh my... Wait, what? Nothing seemed to be going right for us in this moment, although that would change fairly quickly as we came across what I'd argue is the best charm in the entire game. Quick Slash, as its name suggests, makes our slashes, well, quick. Yeah. Anyway, with the king's branding, we can actually open this door down in the ancient basin. Please don't ask me how long it took me to get here, because I won't be able to tell you. Either way, seeing as we're the new king of Hallownest, we're granted access to the Hallownest's largest dumping ground, although to our horror, it seems as though what's been dumped here are different versions of us. Well, either that or siblings of ours, but I'm just going to go with different versions of us. In the same way that humans who are born are essentially the winning sperm out of billions, you could say that the knight here is the chosen one out of a billion vessels.
Stop it. Get some help.
I'll leave you guys to ponder that autistic notion, as I had better things to do, namely pick up another 2 upgrades in the Abyss Shriek and the Shade Cloak, the latter of which makes us invincible during our dashes. With such an overpowered upgrade under our belt, it truly did feel like the world was our oyster, as long as that oyster didn't include Deep Nest. Don't ask me how I found this area. I definitely didn't Google it because I was shitting myself and completely lost. No, definitely not. Joking aside, the haunting build up to the Nos fight is something to marvel. I mean, whose sick fucking idea was it to show literal clones of us scurrying away in the dark with no music playing, only to then watch them morph into this monstrosity moments later. I was so stunned in fact that I quite literally took a pounding on my first attempt. I had forgotten how to jump, how to attack, how to wipe my ass after shitting myself. It was just a complete shit show. Now I say that, but even after composing myself and returning to his arena, I found myself getting overwhelmed at just how quickly his attack turnovers were. It felt like there was no time to heal in between his charges, and his fucking vomit attack always left some stain on the ground, meaning I'd often drop into them just to take some more damage. It wasn't until our 3rd attempt where I even tried dashing through him with our new cloak, and seeing how that worked, I started to abuse the shit out of it until we finally defeated him. With Nosk out of the way, we're able to pick up another Pale Orb, which might not seem that great of a reward, but it does bring our total up to 2, meaning we could visit the Nailsmith back in the City of Tears to have our nail upgraded once more. At this point, a lot of my decisions regarding where to go next basically saw me staring at the goddamn map and looking for spots that hadn't been filled in yet. Sure, it may look rather pedestrian, but it helped me find a few marsh shards, some charms, as well as Brenda, who somehow got lost in this small cavern despite the pathway leading to it being extremely narrow and covered in spikes. Like, can someone explain how the fuck she even got here in the first place? She tells us she's returning to Dirtmouth, which in Dung Beetle means feel free to stop by whenever you want. With that in mind, I made my way straight there, where we not only picked up another marsh shard, but also exposed her strange obsession with the mighty Zode. Now, considering we manhandled the real Zode, it didn't surprise me that the fight against its beefed up counterpart took place within a dream. Although calling this a fight would be selling Zode short. This guy absolutely fisted me over and over again. His attack patterns just felt so awkward to read, and it didn't help that he'd create tidal waves every time he jumped. It's embarrassing to admit, but I found him to be one of the hardest bosses we'd come across so far. From here, I decided to check if the countless grubs we'd freed had made their way back home. Instead, I was greeted by a constant rain of Geo from the father grub, which just proved that even in dire situations like these, there's always going to be unconditional love to see. With our net worth now placing us in the top of the latest Forbes list, I knew it was only a matter of time before we'd become the target of multiple leeches. The smartest thing to do in this situation would be to make a donation, as we not only decrease our wealth, but we simultaneously trick the masses into thinking we're a good person, when really, we're just a greedy piece of shit. Wait, all of our geo? Yeah, no fucking shot. Because my IQ matches that of the many bugs in this game, I thought this fountain would slurp up all of my geo, so I stupidly hauled ass back to Millibel, where it deposited half of my remaining geo just so I would have a few thousand afterwards. I then returned back to the fountain, where I quickly learned that this fountain had a maximum donation amount, meaning I didn't even need to waste my time going to Millibel in the first place. If only HelloNest allowed for invoicing, or better yet, electronic invoicing to make all of our payment hassles a complete breeze. Luckily for you guys, whether it's your need to buy copious amounts of energy monster drinks, or someone to scrub your internet history after watching one of my videos, Odoo invoicing can sort you out. Odoo being the master of all trades means it can help lessen the burden that comes with managing your business, regardless if it involves accounting, inventory, website creation, or invoicing. In our case, Odoo's invoicing app doesn't just make creating customizable professional invoices a cakewalk, it also allows us to send invoices in seconds, add products and services to be invoiced, and indicate quantities. Keep track of our discussions with your customer directly from the chatter, which includes emails, notes, and scheduling activities such as calls and meetings. Odoo invoicing makes things so simple that you'd have a harder time defeating a crawler than creating an invoice. Best of all, under Odoo's first app for free policy, you can start creating and sending invoices for free with unlimited hosting and support. Don't go wasting your time like I just did in Hollow Knight. Go to the link in the description below to start creating your very own personalized invoices. Thanks again to Odoo for sponsoring today's video.
And now for something completely different.
From here I paid a visit to both the Seer as well as the Charm Lover just for a few more collectibles as well as the final charm notch. I also came across this massive fucking slug that threw up yet another charm. Since we were near Greenpath, I decided to explore this massive open area that we hadn't had a chance to yet, and given how I was failing to platform my way around these basic ass spikes, it was probably for the best that I'd left this till now. At the end of this hellscape disguised as a luscious jungle, we find the home of Nailmaster Shio. Like his brother, he offered to teach us a nail art, although I was far more curious about how the fuck he even gets back home after going out. Alas, with another nail art mastered, I ventured back into the Stone Sanctuary, where we're able to fight another warrior dream in the form of No Eyes. She, like the majority of the dream bosses, comes with her very own gimmick, that being the constant spamming of these ghostly faces. As she takes more damage, she spawns in more of these faces to the point where we can't really afford to stop moving. Following this, I made my way back into the Fog Canyon, an area in which I hadn't explored at all, mainly due to this dark barrier. Now that we possess the Shadow Cloak though, we're able to pass through these barriers with the only side effect being the loss of a single brain cell. For most people, this would be a rather insignificant drawback. For someone like me though, who's only got a few to work with in the first place, its impact immediately made itself known. In all seriousness, the only place we hadn't explored in the Fog Canyon was an area known as the Teacher's Archives, and thanks to Cornifer's high-tech maps, we were able to deduce that our next dreamer was resting inside them. Outside, we find Quirrell, who tells us that he went to school here as a kid. Instead of a wholesome story, however, he fills us in on the abuse he received from Monomon, citing the mask he wears on his head to be hers. He'd apparently stolen it, so she couldn't hide her grotesque face anymore, ultimately keeping her locked away in the Teacher's Archives. Hearing this brought a tear to our hollow eyes, and in a fit of rage, we made it a goal of ours to exact revenge on Monomon. Unfortunately, Monomon knew this day would come, and in turn set up the perfect defense mechanism, a massive electrified jellyfish. Wait, what? Umu here only has one real attack, in which it summons a string of electrical pulses that spawn inside your asshole, forcing us to move constantly. Its other unique gimmick is the fact that we can't damage it at all with our weapons. Thankfully, it seems Quirrell wanted revenge as well, as he had followed us into the boss room. Better yet, because he grew up here, he knew the exact method for lowering this thing's defenses, resulting in a relatively simple kill. With her main guardian defeated, Monomon had no choice but to let us enter her dreamscape, where we did what we do best. Suck them dry. suck their life force out of them. With another dreamer's soul slurped up, I ventured forth into the Queen's Garden, which just so happened to be one of the most cancerous areas yet. Not only do the platforms here flip over the moment you stand on them, they're oftentimes paired with these flying arseholes that shoot out these projectiles that are somehow the slowest moving things ever, yet always seem to hit me. These mantises in particular are far stronger than the mantises we faced back in the village. Their attacks have far more range and come out far quicker than their peaceful counterparts, making for some rather tense combat scenarios. It wasn't just the combat that's tough though. The landscapes in these gardens are filled to the brim with thorns that will instantly expose your dogshit platforming skills the moment you hit them. Along the way, I discovered another stag station, which just so happened to be the last one I had to discover. Apparently, with each new station that we discover, the last stag remembers more of his past, and upon reaching this last station, he informs us that he now somehow remembers the route to this stag's nest. Despite our curiosity, there were still a few things we needed to do in the Queen's Gardens, namely picking up the first half of the King's soul after our date with the White Lady. The only problem is reaching her requires us to defeat the traitor Lord. The supposed brother to the Mantis sisters, this guy had been cast out of the village for giving too many shitty haircuts. The concerning part of all of this though is that he still wasn't over that banishment, meaning he channeled that residual rage straight into our foreheads. Holy fuck, I've never been destroyed so fast. To say I struggled against the traitor Lord would be a massive understatement. This boss, more than any other, made me want to take a shotgun to my nutsack. His attacks are fast, they deal 2 whole masks of damage, and most of them span the whole arena, making them extremely awkward to dodge. Granted, I had been caught completely off guard, meaning I hadn't once considered using the Shadow Cloak to iframe his attacks, which as we'll come to see, is one of the best strategies to beat this guy. I quickly learned after a handful of deaths that there was no obvious opening with which we could heal. This caused me to do something I had rarely done leading up to the stage. I had to change my charm setup.
It's time to stop!
And not only that, I had to do this on multiple occasions. That should show you just how sore my ass had become from the constant fisting. I haven't even mentioned the AIDS-inducing run back to this fight, which sees us having to platform across multiple flipping platforms. I don't even want to know how many times it took me to defeat this fucking mantis, but you can bet your sweet ass I celebrated it as if I'd completed it first try. Lock in, I can't get hit once here. Oh my god. Wait, is it bugged? Wait, did I fucking... Yes, dude, yes. First fucking try, you know.
What?
And I guess Cloth here sacrificed herself for no real reason, as we had this whole fight under control the entire time. As I alluded to before, defeating the traitor Lord grants us a date with the White Lady, and considering how charismatic we are, she offers us one half of the King's souls in the White Fragment. With our task completed, we could finally make time to visit the Stag's Nest, although if we're being honest, there's quite literally nothing to do here. Outside of destroying this floating worm and learning our final nail art from Nailmaster Mato, there really isn't anything exciting about this area. There is a short platforming challenge beneath the cliffs, but even this is a cakewalk by this point. Before returning to Dirtmouth though, I made sure to pick up Jonai's Blessing, Boulder Shell, and Fury of the Fallen, just so I'd never have to come back to this place. Back in Dirtmouth, I paid Sly another visit, only to find an opening to a secret underground cavern. It's here where we learn that Sly is the great nail sage himself, and given the fact that we'd learned every nail art from his disciples, he was willing to part with a rather strong charm. By this point, we'd essentially explored every area available in the base game, meaning it was time to do some cleanup work. This saw us going to previous areas and collecting things like charms, freeing more grubs, only to die on the way out, as well as defeating more bosses, after getting my ass kicked first. The best thing to come out of this small scavenger hunt was the ability to place a dream gate wherever we wished. This pretty much killed any semblance of a run back, as all we needed to do was drop a dream gate just before the boss arena, and any time we died, we could teleport back to it within seconds. Speaking of which, the first place I wanted to test out this dream gate was back at the Hive. I had the unfortunate experience of getting my cheeks clapped by a literal bee. I had to live with that shame for days on end, but now I was about to exact my revenge. Granted, I wasn't overly confident, evident by the fact that I dropped a dream gate down like a little pussy outside of his arena. Despite my cautious approach though, the Hive Knight this time around went down without much struggle. I guess our coiled nail and the ability to dash through literal attacks was too much for this bee's stripe ass to handle, and before long we'd claimed his tribe's holy treasure, the Hive Blood Charm. From here, I continued to climb up Kingdom's Edge before coming across another black barrier. Behind this barrier was another warrior dreamer, and let's just say, he was by far the hardest yet. What makes Markoth so hard is the fact that he's constantly firing out these little spears, meaning you have absolutely no time to stop and heal yourself should you need to. Alongside this, Markoth starts the fight with a shield that rotates around him, dealing contact damage should you hit them. This then turns into 2 shields, making your odds of hitting him less likely than getting hit by lightning strikes every day of the week. For a month straight. I will admit, I got pretty lucky on my 3rd attempt as I managed to defeat him with 1 master spare. We weren't the only ones having a hard time though, as upon ascending Kingdom's Edge, I came across a rather saddening sight. No, Tiso, what? Damn, he actually got his cheeks clapped. As depressing as his death was, we'd be meeting him in heaven soon enough, as I was fondled by the collector moments later. Dying to this guy in hindsight is pretty embarrassing, as he's most definitely one of the easier bosses we've had to deal with. A lot of this fight just comes down to spacing and dealing with the mobs as they break out of these pots. It's really easy to get overrun by enemies if you let them pile up, and when paired with the unhinged movements of the collector himself, you could be in for a world of hurt. If you hadn't realized, the collector was the one storing the grubs into these glass containers, and following his defeat, we're able to pick up the collector's map, which will show us the locations of any remaining grubs. From here, I decided to return to the Colosseum of Fools, where we looked to take on the Trial of the Conqueror. As expected, this was a slightly tougher challenge than the first trial, as it not only introduced completely new enemies, but stronger variants of the most annoying enemies known to man. This trial was also the first one to include waves with no standable ground. Not only did this make fighting off enemies extremely awkward, but it came with the drawback of not being able to heal at all. My first attempt was a valiant one, but I did falter towards the latter half just because I was unprepared for just how many flying enemies would be soaring towards my forehead. Alas, with an abundance of experience now under my belt, I was able to fight my way through the second trial, dispatching these 2 balloons in record time. Completing this trial rewarded us with the final pale ore we needed to upgrade our nail to its strongest form. With the strongest nail in Hallownest now in our possession, we made sure to get rid of the nailsmith for good, so that no one else could use his services. Seeing as we were already in the City of Tears, I used this opportunity to open up this door with the elegant key, leading us into another battle with a soul warrior. Defeating him grants us access to the top floor, which houses our final spell upgrade. The next hour or so was spent collecting things like charms, defeating more warrior dreams and obtaining more mass shards, as well as some more soul fragments. Everything seemed to be going well, until I stumbled across this entity known as the Grey Mourner. Unlike the numerous other NPCs located throughout Hallownest, she has a particular quest for us to complete, which involves having to carry a delicate flower to the grave of her lover. Now, as tame and wholesome as this quest seems, there's a definite catch. We have to make this unbelievably long trek over to the Queen's Gardens without taking a single point of damage. This trek was far harder than it seemed at first, amplified by the fact that we're not allowed to use the stag beetle or the tram systems either. I can't begin to describe the amount of times I'd get to the very end just to fuck up when trying to platform through these admittedly easy segments. Oh fuck no. Dude, please. Oh, someone just kill me now. Please, someone just put me out of my misery. I wouldn't be surprised if I spent over an hour going back to the Grey Mourner for more delicate flowers. This is even with a dream gate placed down. All I know is I'd rather shit shards of glass out of my ass than have to do this quest again. As thanks for completing her request, the mortar dissipates into oblivion, leaving behind the final Mars shard we'd been searching for. All we had left to do was find a few more grubs, collect a few more charms, and make our way towards the top of the Watcher's Spire. If only things were that simple. See, the Watcher's Spire is filled to the brim with patrolling guards, some of which guard the final grub. The others, however, protect Lurian the Watcher, which just so happens to be the last dreamer we need to suck dry. The toughest of these protectors are without a doubt the Watcher Knights, who cosplay as statues before being woken by what I can only imagine is some good smelling fucking food. Unfortunately for them, the only thing waiting for them once awake is an ass beating from yours truly.
2 seconds later.
Okay, so maybe I underestimated these guys a little. They're actually quite difficult. Their swipe attacks have quite a long reach, but the real challenge comes from their ability to morph into a ball and jump around the arena. Because of their hard shells, we're not able to translate our pogos into free damage, meaning they're essentially invulnerable during half their attacks. Dealing with one of them is already hard enough, but throughout the fight, you're likely going to have to face two at once, which makes things all the more challenging. The best way I found to deal with them was to focus down one of them as fast as possible, while the next one was still being baited out by the smell of a nice roasted meal. This ensured that for the majority of the fight, I'd only have to deal with one. The quick slash charm essentially carried me through this fight, as its damage increase made short work of these Watcher Knights in a one-on-one scenario. With his trusty knights clapped up, Lorien had no choice but to let us have his way with him. With all three Dreamers' juices sucked up, the seal placed on the black egg had finally broken, meaning we could finally save our brother and put an end to things. Before that though, there were a few more things we had to do, namely pick up the final charm from the Grubfather here, as well as awake the Dream Nail to its final form. The problem with the latter half, however, is the fact that we'll need 1800 essence to do so, and even more if we wish to hear the Seer's final words. By this point, I defeated all the warrior dreams, meaning the only other quick method of farming essence was to beat the alternative dream versions of old bosses. The first of these I tackled was fittingly the very first boss I faced in this game, the False Knight. Now considering he was the first boss, I didn't expect this fight to be that hard, especially with all of our Safe to say, I'd never been so wrong in my entire life. What I soon realised was that these dream variants were the same bosses but on steroids. The False Knight, who was a slow simple boss, had somehow been transformed into this fucking beast who would constantly fire out shockwaves and rush towards me. It was suffocating to say the least, and I found myself getting humbled time and time again. Like anything though, the moment I took a breather and let myself learn his attack patterns and how to avoid them, I was able to defeat him. Despite this triumph though, the following fights weren't any easier. The Soul King's variant, the Soul Tyrant, pounded me once, yet the worst of all was the Lost Kin. This was the same boss I gave up on all those hours ago, and rightly so, as I was still getting my ass kicked despite having an upgraded arsenal. Getting used to the timing of his rapid attacks and the constant spawning of these shit blobs took a good few attempts, and even then our execution had to be perfect if we wanted any hope of defeating him. With another dozen deaths or so added to the death counter, I made my way back to this Seer battered and bruised. The good news is that these three bosses provided enough essence to not only awaken the Dream Nail, but to hear the Seer's final words and send her on her way. Thus remained one last challenge, and no, it's not the final boss. Instead, it's back in the Colosseum of Fools, where I still had to complete the final trial. This trial had it all. Copious amounts of enemies rushing you at the same time, enemy variants that fisted me because I had no idea what they did, and of course cancerous flying enemies that we had to take out in mid-air without being able to touch the ground. The spiked grounds remained the hardest to beat, although it was during my second attempt where I realised just how powerful some of these nail arts truly were. The beast tamer at the end of the trial as well wasn't too bad to take down, as I just focused down one of them at a time while paying attention to the attacks of the other. This, paired with them giving you plenty of time to heal, makes for a rather lackluster final wave. With the final trial completed, we could now make our way over to the Temple of the Black Egg, where we see the absolute state of our brother. Unsure if this was some bondage kink of his, we free him from his shackles, only for him to let out the same sound he makes after I clapped his cheeks in Smash Bros. It soon became obvious, however, that this was no longer our brother, as he'd momentarily stab himself throughout the fight.
It's time to stop!
This fight for the most part is quite the spectacle, but it's not all that hard, most definitely by design, as we're fighting what seems to be the infected, bruised version of the Hollow Knight. Having done more damage to himself than we had, we were eventually given the opportunity to siphon the infection straight out of him, thus becoming the chosen one who sealed the infection all by ourselves. The game ends with the realization that we've now taken the Hollow Knight's place, and with no hope of another character as strong as us appearing, we knew we were cooked for all eternity. That's how my first playthrough came to an end. With our game completion totaling 102% and the completion achievement acquired, we had technically 100% of the base game, or at least that's what I thought. In all honesty, the script had been written up to this point with this playthrough in mind. Sure, I thought the Hollow Knight boss was rather disappointing, but I couldn't understand why it was so based on the narrative itself. With that said, as I do with most of my videos, I like to research a bit just to help when talking about specific events or characters. And during this very research, I'd learnt about the true ending, as well as an even more intimidating boss. Now I don't usually admit to this, but I was low-key addicted to this game, so any excuse to continue playing it, I took. Thus I jumped back into Hallownest and made my way back to the palace grounds where a broken knight laid. Dream nailing him takes us to a tranquil area known as the White Palace, and while there are a few enemies, this whole palace essentially acts as one final platforming challenge. Now, if you hadn't realized while watching,
I wasn't exactly a connoisseur of the platforming in this game, so a whole ass platforming challenge disguised as a palace wasn't exactly something I came into with much confidence. With that said, there were only a few areas in which I truly struggled, mainly when it required me to bounce off these goddamn razor blades. I also seem to have this innate ability to always fuck up my spacing when using the Crystal Heart ability. Now, despite my constant need to dash into these spinning blades, I was making good progress. If you hadn't noticed, I was using the Hive Blood Charm here, which I thought would be perfect when attempting a whole mirage of platforming challenges, as it heals our latest mask over time. It took an awful lot of patience, but slowly but surely, we were creeping our way towards our destination. Ironically enough, despite the constant damage being taken, because of our Hive Blood Charm, I was able to make it through the entire palace without dying a single time. Resting at the top of the palace is the Pale King's corpse, and considering how short he was, there was no way in hell he deserved to be the reigning king. Ignoring the fact that we're somehow shorter, we knocked this idiot off his throne only to take our rightful place as the new ruler of Hallownest. It didn't take us long to realize that this role was quite dogshit, as there was no one left to really serve us. Instead, we picked up the black fragment half of the king's soul and made our way back to the abyss. With the king's soul equipped, we're able to enter a secret area at the bottom of the abyss, which is filled to the brim with these shades. There's a few spikes down in these claustrophobic tunnels, so we do need to be careful, but after a while, we find what appears to be another punctured testicle. Ignoring how chopped our reflection looks, we dream now the sphere, which throws us into our first nightmare. In it, we have to scale the abyss with minimal vision, all while some freak whispers random jargon into our ears. Upon reaching the peak, we witness a vision of the Pale King, as well as our brother. Before we're able to call out to him though, we're flying back into the abyss, begging the question of why we even bothered to climb up here in the first place. Having cracked our skull on the fall, our heart turns to the void in the hopes of it reviving us, a calling that actually worked out, as we awaken next to the bursted testicle once again. With our now blackened heart, we made our way back to the Temple of the Black Egg, where we notice that Hornet is now waiting outside. She essentially exposes the fact that she's a pussy, meaning we'll have to do everything on our own once again. For anyone that cares, this was the charm setup I was running going into the final boss battle. No idea if it's any good, but it's just what I was comfortable with. Either way, the fight against the Hollow Knight is the exact same, at least up until a certain point. See, once the Hollow Knight has reached a certain health cap, Hornet here decides it's the perfect time to try and steal some of their glory. Us on the other hand, realize this was the perfect chance to free our brother from the infection altogether, as we dream nail his ass only to end up in an area with sunlight for the first time. Stepping atop these platforms gives us the option to challenge something, and despite my growing concerns that it'd be the sun itself, instead it's just some dumbass moth. This here is the true final boss of the game, the Radiance, and boy oh boy does she deserve that title. Her attacks all deal double damage and the spacing required to avoid most of them is rather awkward to say the least. The hardest part of this boss fight though is remaining composed. She has numerous attacks, some of which she starts to overlap, and it's in these moments that you can literally go from full HP to 0 in a matter of seconds. What's worse is that anytime you want to challenge the Radiance, you have to deal with the Hollow Knight first, and while it had become rather easy by this point, it was still a rather annoying time sink. Whether it was jumping into these horizontal spikes or getting overwhelmed by our attacks, this was for sure one of the toughest bosses we'd faced. Now with all of that said, she wasn't unbelievably hard. In fact, once I started focusing on dodging her attacks rather than always trying to damage her, she became a lot more manageable. Out of all of her phases, her third one is most definitely her toughest, as we're now forced onto these smaller platforms with hardly any wiggle room. It was during this phase especially that I looked to lock in and just avoid her attacks. I wouldn't try and dash over to the platform she was on, rather I'd wait for her to come closer to me. There were definitely some sketchy points, but I did eventually get an opportunity to ascend towards the heavens. This is her final phase, where she constantly will shoot out beams at us as a musky darkness rises below us. In this sense, it is a timed segment, but you definitely have more than enough time to plan your jumps, ultimately making sure to avoid her beams at all cost. Once I reached the top, all it took was one last nail strike. This dampened her light, allowing the darkness to grab a hold of her. Our brother seemed to be at the forefront of it all, and with his help, we were able to bitch slap the shit out of the Radiance. The game ends from Hornet's point of view. With the Radiance defeated, the Temple of the Black Egg dissipates, taking away the void in our heart alongside it. Alas, all that remains is our cracked skull, the same one we'd received when taking that fall from before. But with the infection gone, the rest of our brothers and sisters can kindly fuck off, never to be seen again. Thus ends our 100% adventures in Hollow Knight, or maybe I should say 103%.
At the end of it all, we had died a total of 87 times, which in terms of our typical death counts, is pretty goddamn high. At last, the base game of Hollow Knight really is just the beginning, and from what I've tasted so far in the added content, everything we've just discussed is mere child's play. Either way, that's a story for another video. For now, that's where my adventures in Hollowness ended. I hope you guys enjoyed this video, and if you did, please do consider subscribing and dropping a like on the video. It means an absolute ton to me. Thank you to all my channel members as usual. Your support means the world to me, and I'll be seeing you all in the next one.